This is Tim, and this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo. In looking for a webcomic to feature on the show, I ran across Power Nap by Mexican creators Maritza Campos and Bachan. It's a comedy about a future world where people take a drug to help them stay awake constantly, and sleeping is considered socially unacceptable. Much of it takes place in an office environment, but there are plenty of science fiction elements and monsters. This week I talk with Maritza and Bachan about the state of comics in Mexico, their foray into online comics, how much of what happens in Power Nap might really happen in the future, and more. First, a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. We'll then get a percentage of what you spend. It costs you nothing extra and helps us cover web hosting and other costs of presenting this show every week. I am talking with Maritza Campos and Bachan, who are both in the Yucatan area of Mexico. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I was interested, while reading your comic, the Power Nap. The English is very good, and you are very good at English. Have you lived abroad, or?
Well, first of all, that's mostly Maritza's fault. She's a hell of a good writer. She writes a lot better English than I can speak it, I guess. So I think that's for you to answer, Mari.
Oh, well, I have never lived anywhere else than here. So mostly that's why my pronunciation is not that good, but my written English is, I have more practice with that. That's why. But no, I have never lived anywhere else. I just learned English, just going to school and reading and basically writing it for a lot of years.
And in my case, it's mostly watching movies and TV shows. After all, most of all of that was in English when we were kids here.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pretty common for a lot of people here speaking English.
Okay. Yeah, I have to confess I've been in Tokyo all this time. I haven't made it to Mexico, but I've been in Japan a lot. I mean, what's the comics community like in Mexico? Are there a lot of creators there?
Yeah, we've had it's a stormy relationship. It's not a very active scene right now. At least, actually, no, it's an active scene. It's just not a big industry anymore. It used to be a huge industry in Mexico for at least about half of the 20th century. It even had some governmental support because it was a good way to teach literacy to people in this country. So I'm talking about the 50s, the 60s, 70s, all of that. It was full of comic books just made for national consumption. To tell you the kind of stories that used to be sold here were mostly romance aimed at women. Actually, if you have an image of what a Mexican soap opera is, that whole thing started as a comic book.
I see.
Actually, the most successful soap operas at first in the 70s were actually adaptations of comic books.
Okay. Sounds like Japan.
That's pretty much... I think so, yeah. It's not superheroes here at all.
But yeah, I mean, in Japanese TV, so many of the kind of mini-series that they have for 10, 11 weeks at a time are based on comics.
Yeah.
It's similar. Yeah, I think that it was similar in scope. I mean, in those days, you could have millions of comics, of copies of the comics, and dozens, maybe hundreds of titles going on and every day, not even every week, every month, there will be a lot of comics.
There were daily comics, yes.
Yes, there were daily comics because basically it was super cheap entertainment, and that means that the general populace who could afford to just buy a comic for a few cents and we'll have a good laugh and maybe follow a good story or maybe a super corny story or something. But I would say that there was a big influence that suddenly disappeared when the government subsidized paper stopped
They used
partially.
to subsidize the paper
Yes,
for printing, paper for printing,
and
and that
so that
suddenly stopped in 1985. That's
exactly.
I'm a bit more into it because Maritza and I, we both have very, even though we're both Mexican comic book artists, we have different backgrounds. She's always being an independent webcomic artist.
Okay.
But I started out working on the local industry in 1989 as a kid. I got into the belly of the beast just as the beast was dying. Tell you the truth.
Nice timing.
Yeah, I had enough to see the last days of comic books the way they were done in the old ways. I actually had some teachers, some classic Mexican cartoonists here, so my style is a bit like a combination of old style and new. It was a weird thing back then. But Maritza comes entirely. She's from the digital world, so she had none of that. So,
I see.
so
Basically, my
we're
friends were comic strips.
So what
yeah.
what was it that caused the industry there to kind of collapse?
Several things. There's not just one thing. It was just a very long, drawn-out decline. Now, with hindsight, we can pretty much say that the fatal year, was probably 1985, which is when the biggest publisher went under, which was Novedades Editores. Officially, it was because of the subsidy of paper. That paper just was not available for them to print comic books anymore, and they folded. But I would say it was a longer thing, a deeper thing than that. The publishers stopped. Um, Let me see if I can put it a little bit shorter, because this is a very long story. I don't want to bore you with it. But it was like the comic book industry here in Mexico was a lot like the movie factory system in the U.S. in the 20s, like MGM, like
Yeah, the studio system.
the studio system. They controlled absolutely everything. And since they had some stars in the 50s, and it was a hassle for them to have these superstars, what they did in the 70s and 80s is rotate all the artists on several books, so nobody got famous. And since nobody got famous, nobody got actually interested in what they were doing. So quality overall kind of dropped. But they prefer to have a stable, regular quality of output, but no superstars at all. So to them, it was like a system that worked for years. Problem with that is that it attracted no new readers at all. So as older people got older and they stopped buying comics or dying off, there were no younger readers at all. So by the time when I was a kid and I was into comics, I was not reading Mexican comics at all. I was reading mostly European and American comics. When I got into the industry, it was, at first, I must admit, kind of depressing.
Yeah.
It was a very different environment than what I thought would be to work drawing comic books. But it was already on the way out. The readership was getting smaller and smaller and smaller until finally 85, 90s, it just went out of business. It's pretty much dead now. And now in Mexico, what you were going back to your very first question, what we have is a younger scene of people trying out stuff online, mostly webcomic artists and more experimental stuff. As an industry, it's pretty much dead right now.
I see. So
I think that's
when the industry was going well, so you said there were a lot of romance books. Are there any other genres, or mostly that?
Well, yeah. Well, they always followed like the same kind of format. Physically, they were really small books, 1/4 of letter page. You could put it in the back of your pocket on your pants, and it was about 100 and 120 pages, really low quality because they had to produce we had to produce about 120 pages in a month. So there was not a lot of time to do things right.
Yeah,
and it was extremely low paid. The readership was mostly, at first it was everybody, but by the end it was mostly older people or workers who just read them on the way to and from work on the subways or stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So they tried to make the stories as simple as possible, and they were just basically just a hero trying to get the girl, just like that. and they disguised it in cowboy stories or cop stories, or by the very end it was actually just really racy, mostly soft porn.
Mm.
When they started losing readership, they just went for the easy way out. Just put a lot of sex in it. And it bought them a couple extra years of life, but at the end, it just died out.
Mm-hmm. I see.
So I think, it's a lot longer story than that, but I think in a nutshell, that's pretty much what happened.
Sure. Okay. So nowadays, with the sort of web cartoonist scene and so forth, are there any like comics conventions in Mexico?
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know why you're laughing, Maritza. Maybe you want to explain that?
No, please explain. You know
Okay,
better. You know better than that.
I've moved a lot more into that area than Mari. Again, she was always living in the Matrix entirely, so she missed a lot of this here in Mexico. But here in Mexico, we still do have a lot of comic book conventions, but they're mostly for superheroes or foreign comics. Very few Mexican stuff or local stuff.
So not much of an artist's alley, huh?
It's barely starting. Maybe the last 5 to 7 years, we've had a small area or an artist alley with some pretty cool stuff. But to be honest, I don't think we make it over 5 or 10 books a year, new books. And most people are actually going through the plan of doing books instead of magazines. It's a lot easier to handle that when you're a small publisher. Mm-hmm. And it's remained a little bit small. Now, there was a big comic convention that lasted 4 years, Festo it was called, and that was the only one that tried to do authors comic convention. They did it at the same time with a big book fair, a children's book fair. They just got a part of it, and they had a bunch of us artists going there, having booths. Actually, the artist alley would be the main thing of the whole thing. There was no people disguised or stuff like that. Just comic book artists there.
No cosplay, no Marvel and DC guys. Just
authors. And then that thing disappeared because of political stuff here. That mostly it was built because of a grant for government support, and that suddenly dried out. And now they're starting a new one. It's going to be in May. It's Conque. It was one of the oldest comic book conventions that disappeared a few years back. Now it's coming back, but way bigger now. And they are including a lot of the stuff that happened in Festo with authors, but also they're bringing superstars. Stan Lee is coming over.
Wow.
They're going to have they have the help of DC and Marvel and Disney, and there's going to be a Star Wars thing over there. So it seems it's going to be big in Querétaro. It's Cinco de Mayo, May the 5th. So let's see how that turns out. I'll be there.
Okay.
But it's barely the first one of those.
All right, well, let's talk about you guys. So, Maritza, what kind of comics were you reading growing up?
I was basically not reading comics.
Oh, nothing at all. Huh?
Well, I was reading comic strips. That's the world I came from. I was reading Peanuts and Calvin and Hobbes and Bloom County. Basically comic strips. but no comic books of superheroes or anything like that. I started by reading comic strips, and basically that's what I learned. That's the language I learned in terms of comics.
Okay. Now, I didn't get much of a chance to look at it, but I found the comic that you're doing by yourself, CRFH, or College Roomies from Hell. And
Yes.
this looks like it might be a little bit more of a format like a comic strip, like a daily thing.
Yes, it's formatted more like a comic strip. In fact, I did try for a while to format it like a comic book, and it was so uncomfortable for me to accommodate the humor to the format. I just could not do it, and it didn't work. So I just came back to the original format that worked for me, because CRFH is really fast paced. So I just stick a lot of stuff in every panel, and it does not really work so well, in my opinion, as a comic book. It works a lot better as a comic strip.
I see.
That's why.
So I'm just looking at the most recent. I think this is the most recent page. So
If it's in black and white, it probably is.
Okay, no, actually, it's in color.
Okay.
It's
Let me just...
I don't see a
But
date.
he's reading my comic, not Power Nap.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's January 11th, CRFH. So tell me, what is CRFH about? I see at least two women talking and not getting along very well.
Well, basically, I just started this as a kind of a joke. Oh my god, I'm sorry.
Should we wait for her? I don't know how she's going to take long. I can tell you, I've never actually read CRFH either, but I did know that she was doing what none of us was actually doing at the time, which was living off of doing webcomics.
Oh.
Which is what took me to search her out and get to talk to her.
I'm very sorry for that.
Don't worry. I was just relating the story how I met you by searching you out because of CRFH.
Okay.
CRFH.
Okay, well, I was going to ask about that too, how you met. But yeah, so you said you started it as a joke?
Yeah, I kind of started it as a joke because basically when I started doing CRFH, this was around 1999. There was a lot of people just putting the strips online, and I was having fun reading them, and I was thinking, well, I could do this actually. And I don't know how to draw, honestly, but I started doing my comic, but basically just pull the characters, the first characters that I could think of, and it started basically where there were a lot of college comic strips in that day, because a lot of people were just scanning their college strips from the newspapers, the college newspapers, and they were just scanning it and putting them online. So that was basically my inspiration for this. I was also in college, so I just started this as some sort of joke. The stories just were about some roommates in college, obviously. And the stories become just crazier and crazier, and just more and more surreal. And I put a lot of my kind of magic realism background in that. So basically that was it. It was something I did to have fun, and it suddenly turned into some sort of business because I was studying computer science at the time. But I discovered that I liked doing this, so that's the thing. I don't know if that answers it.
I see. And so, while you were on the phone there, Bachan was saying that you had made some amount of money. I don't know if it's your full living, but some from webcomics.
Yeah, I do. I do one I used to do from many years ago. Obviously, no one is in comics to get rich.
No.
So I kind of have to supplement my income from other sources, like basically programming and stuff. But basically, yes, this is what I do. mostly.
I see. Okay. So how did you guys meet?
Okay, I think that comes to me. As I said, I always wanted to do comic books. I was in love with the language ever since I was a kid. This is what I wanted to do forever. But as I said before, I got into the comic book industry just at the time to see it die.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of worried about that because I ended up working on advertising, and every time I had more work in advertising and less work doing comics, which is not what I wanted. But at the same time, I was seeing the comic book industry in Mexico getting reduced. I started seeing that the people on the web were getting to be really popular.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the point of view that I think a bunch of us had back then. I'm talking about maybe 2006, 2007, I guess. I can't remember. But I could see that most of the people drawing web comics were really not artists. The art was really crappy, and then sometimes,
like
I
my
mean, the
comic.
general attitude.
Like mine.
The point is,
no, you should look at mine. It's worse.
Well, that's the point. At first, the very first thing you feel when you're a trained artist, to call it something, is threatened. Because you see that I'm having a hard time to make a living out of this, and these guys who don't even draw are actually making money. It's not fair, and that blah, blah, blah. You can imagine all that. There was a lot of that for the few comic book artists working here. But what I couldn't avoid seeing is that there was a trend that as time went by, they were getting bigger, and there were more of them, and there were less publishing houses. So I knew at some point, these things are going to have to professionalize. These things are going to have to start being taken seriously, not just as a hobby. And staying at the sinking ship seemed dumb to me. So I said, you know what? I have no idea how to make money doing web comics, but I should try. Before I started out, which was in 2008, I think. I wanted to find out as much as I could, and looking online for people who actually did this, I found Maritza. And during an event, a comic book event, as one of those conventions we were talking about, I suggested one of the organizers that maybe we should contact her to tell us how she did it. And that's the way we met. Actually, not physically, not live, but it was a very long conference call. I don't know how you remember it, Maritza, but to me, that's the first time I heard you and heard you speak about this.
We did have some kind of a bit of messages here and there, maybe forum interaction. But basically, the first time you heard me, I believe that. I believe it.
Yeah. Well, I was about talking. I mean, we knew about our existence, let's just say it, but we didn't really follow. Well, at least I was not really following her work until I actually got interested in finding out about webcomics. And then it was a very pleasant surprise that not only she did know what she was talking about, but she knew a lot. So it didn't take long for that to just come up with the idea that maybe we should try to do something together. I mean, she's a hell of a good writer, and she knows how to handle the site. And I can have a lot of fun just drawing the ideas she throws. And it's a really good challenge, let me tell you.
Yeah, well, you have to draw quite a variety of stuff in Power Nap, from office scenes to monster attacks to just about anything else.
Yeah.
So now you've got your own site also, this balazo.net. So did you start that before or after Power Nap?
Balazo.net was after, because it was actually the first one I did was Producciones Balazo. It's still there, but it's kind of abandoned right now. That's where I started in 2008.
Okay, is that the one with, I think I read that. Is that the guy who's trying to get away from the city full of superheroes?
No, that's also in, I published that one in both sites. Producciones Balazo is in Spanish, and Balazo.net is in English.
I see. Okay.
So some of the content is the same, just translated. But the original was Balazo. That's where I started out. And I did a lot of experiments. It was not really a commercial success, but it was not meant to be. That was just me trying to figure out how to handle the language, change the format of working on 40 pages on my own and then throwing it out into the world as a full book and never hearing from it again, to doing one page at a time and having a lot of people commenting on this. And the exact moment I just published it. So that dynamic was what really got me hooked.
Yeah, instantaneous commentary.
Yeah, and trading just one editor for about 2,000 or 3,000.
Yeah,
So
I see.
it was a lot of fun there. And when we started working on Power Nap, it was because pretty much Maritza just asked me, what do you want to draw? What do you want to do? And I just gave her a bunch of sketches I had of several characters, a sort of a like casting call or something, and she just made up stories about them, their names, their and all of that. So it's pretty much my designs, but that's the way it started. She turned them into something entirely different from whatever I was thinking. So that's how the two demon guys appeared. They were an old sketch I had about these two guys, Easy and Jeremiah. And she just wrote them with a very different personality than what I had in mind. And over time, they have become a sort of hybrid of what I had in mind and what she's doing.
I see.
It is a lot of fun. It has become a sort of a conversation, at least to me. It's like a bit like playing chess. Like she makes a move, and when I have to compensate it or reply it or put something on the background that she later on will have to explain somehow.
Well, so, it's not like that for me at all. Huh?
Well, that's a bit of a game for me. And it's kind of funny, but she might not think it's like that for her, but she's still replying for everything I do.
Well, how
for me,
is,
it's more like a three-legged race.
It's what? I'm sorry?
Like a three-legged race.
Or
maybe
how so?
Well, we have one leg tied to each other, and then we try to like walking sync. That's more like that for me.
I see. Okay. Well, do you have like any disagreements about how you want the strip to proceed, or work style, or anything like that?
Oddly enough, no. I mean, I have worked with other writers in the past. Well, I don't know. Maritza will tell you right now if she really hates my guts. She just hasn't told me. But for me, it has been probably the easiest process I've ever worked with, because we kind of concentrate on different things. And when we put them together, I think the end result is a lot better than whatever we both could have done on our own. At least the way I see it is, I think she's really good at words, the language of the characters. But she generally just gives me frame one, there's these guys and they're saying this, and she gives me a very long text, a wall of text, which is really good. She always tells me, cut out whatever you don't think works. And I never cut anything because everything works. So what I end up doing is splitting apart her text and try to imagine different visuals for the part of the text she gave me. So she might give me a page with just 4 frames, 4 images, and I end up drawing 9 or 10. And it's exactly the same dialogue that she wrote. I just extended the scene and put a lot of the acting on the characters. So and that's something I had never done before with any other writer. Nobody does it that way. And to me, it's like, I don't want to waste any word that she puts on the screen, because I mean, I enjoy just imagining the faces of the characters when they're saying the lines, or the reactions they're doing when they get shocked. I mean, I really enjoy it. I look forward to drawing every page she sends me.
I see. So you feel like you need to give it a little more room to breathe and not cram it into 4 frames if it really needs more.
Actually, yeah. But it's not just like it's a room to breathe. It's just that when I read the dialogues, a lot of images, these dialogues provoke a lot of images in my head that I need to put there. I mean, there's an example I already said before, which I loved in book number 1, when there's this girl, Wendy, when she sees She's trying to go out on a date with Drew. And Drew is trying to blow her off. But not because she doesn't like her, but he knows she's not going to like him because he's one of those people who needs to sleep. And the whole
we need to talk about that too. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, Maritza sent me this dialogue that said, "Oh, don't tell me you're married. You have a girlfriend. Do you have an It's Complicated?" I couldn't avoid thinking that whole text was just one balloon. To me, it needed to be 3. I couldn't imagine her saying those lines with the same face.
Yeah. I just was rereading that this morning. I remember that. Yeah, each one has a different face, and that really helps the lines. Precisely.
So I cannot write like that when I do my own comics on my own for myself. I mean, so it's something I really enjoy doing. Yeah. To me, the characters become more alive, I think.
Sure. Coming up, the concept of power nap. Will sleep really be a social faux pas in the future? The classic comic that got Bachan into comics, predictions for the comics industry in the next 5 years, and more. It's DCP In Touch, where we hear from you, the listeners. Paul Spence writes, I just listened to episode 534 of Deconstructing Comics, which had an informative discussion about the look and format of comics. Mulele did a good job of explaining his thought process behind the Mind Gator, which I supported on Kickstarter, and he also went into the problems of trying to print what is a non-standard format comic book. This is a practical insight into the business of making comics that I think most readers do not consider. I think he also made a valid point that indie comic creators seem more open to experimenting with format than established companies like Marvel or DC. Justin Wood, a reviewer for Comic Bastards, offered high praise for the look and format of Mind Gator #1, and Paul is quoting here. This is a nice-looking book, packaged with energy and strong futuristic design work, both fleshed out yet stylistically simple in forms, using lines efficiently to produce compelling and animated action-oriented landscapes. It's technically sophisticated, popping with kinetic motion, and stylistically unique to artist Mulele Jarvis, familiar in conceits but not appropriating any specific style. Amazingly, the book is in black and white, which doesn't serve as a detriment. The inky gray tone shading used with sparing specificity to perfectly balance the weight of objects in each panel, making the book thoroughly comprehensible despite the aggressive speed and minimalism the action is communicated with. I loved how this book felt to read visually. I wish I could say I felt the same about the accompanying narrative. Considering the book is available in print, formatted in widescreen landscape, it might be worth picking up to appreciate from time to time solely as art. Paul continues, I agree with Wood's comments completely. Notice that he specifically mentions the widescreen format of the book and how it contributes to it being art object. I keep my copy of Mind Gator #1 on my coffee table because of its distinctive format. It attracts the attention of everyone who sees it. Congratulations to Mulele for his artistic skill, vision, and willingness to experiment with the comic book form. The final result of that experimentation is a visually distinctive work. It stands out when compared with other corporate comics. Thanks, Paul. Send us your opinion. Write to mail@deconstructingcomics.com.
I'm Batman.
And I'm Robin.
This is Tim.
And this is Paul.
To the Bat Polls! The iTunes reviews are in on To the Bat Polls podcast. A terrific podcast, Rave's Got a Rugrat, that brings review, film analysis, and sociological impact to episode-by-episode musings without ever losing the feeling of two brothers with towels tied around their necks, running through the backyard. Unmissable.
Exquisite.
You've heard the reviews, now try it for yourself. New episodes on the 1st, 3rd, and 5th Thursdays of the month on iTunes or Stitcher, or at tothebatpolls.libsyn.com.
Wild!
For nostalgia, analysis, and fun, it's
To the Bat Polls.
So Maritza, tell us about the concept of power nap.
Well, it's actually a pretty fast to explain concept. It's about in the future nobody sleeps because there's a pill that you take that you can basically be awake forever. So you take it every day and you're awake 24 hours a day. So basically society changes around that. And Power Nap is the story of a guy who is allergic to that pill. So he's basically a normal guy, like one of us nowadays. But in that society, in that future, he's an outcast. So yeah, the story is mostly kind of an exploration of what is the world heading to in the terms of society moves really fast and people sleeps less and less. And now with all the distractions and the internet and the fact that you can be watching movies at ungodly hours or something, and the corporations demand longer hours if you want to succeed, and it all becomes kind of a time where you don't have breathing room. You don't have time to stop and smell the flowers. And the premise, without the spoilers, is that it starts affecting the reality as people stop sleeping and just dreaming. And that's basically it. The whole premise of Power Nap.
So that last part that she said is what really got me hooked into it, because to me, it's probably a different reading from what she had in mind, but it's the one that really got me interested. It's to me, Power Nap is like a metaphor for a lot of the stuff that's happened with technology in general. It sounds like a great idea at the time. It changes things sort of better, but it has a hidden side effect, a negative side effect that you just find out really late. But by then, the whole economy has changed, and the whole world is invested on it. It's a bit like fossil fuels, for instance. When it was first used, nobody knew that we could actually change the weather of the planet. Now it's kind of difficult to get out of it. In a way, I think Power Nap is a bit like that. This drug makes people not sleep, and by not sleeping, economy improves a lot. Now people are actually counting on 18-hour work days instead of 6.
Yeah.
And when they see there's a side effect, well, they're trying to hide it because they cannot go back to the way it was. So that's the part that really got me interested in this. That's the kind of science fiction I enjoy the most, the one that can be seen as a metaphor for real problems or real ideas or real things we are dealing with daily.
So Maritza, how much of what's in the comic do you think could really happen in the future?
Well,
hopefully not the monsters.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's true. When I started it, working on the concept back in 2005, I believe it was when I first came up with the concept, because at the time the American Army was developing a drug to allow the jet fighter pilots to stay alert after being a long time without sleeping, because obviously the equipment is so expensive. They don't really care that much about the pilot, I think, but the jet the jet planes, they're really expensive. So one mistake in a crucial second and everything is gone. So they started developing a drug called modafinil that is actually available now. The drug exists, but obviously it allows you to be awake for like 2 days with no side effects, not being tired, not being alert. All your reflexes work well. But just extrapolating that concept, I have read articles that say that we could have a drug like this in 50 years or maybe less. So yes, it is very possible. It is a very possible future, actually.
Yeah, I mean, some things about the future are kind of scary, but yeah. I noticed that the comic is not coming out very frequently lately. Are you guys both busy with other work?
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's mostly my fault.
Well, art takes longer than the writing, probably. So.
Yes.
Yeah, it's mostly I'm a very good fireman, to say it in some way, in advertising. I get to be called when there's a problem that nobody else can solve and it needs a lot of speed. I do mostly storyboards and animatics, and lately I've had a 2-month long time of a lot of work of that like that. So I'm really late with a lot of my comic book stuff.
I see.
Sorry about that, but I hope I'll get back to it soon.
Okay.
The long range plan would be for me to actually quit advertising and do comic books entirely, but still not there yet.
Yeah, sure. Well, that would be the dream. Well, I feel the same way about podcasting, but not anywhere near making my living off of it.
Yeah, and suddenly jobs come that are just too good to pass, so I need to accept them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was looking around for webcomics, trying to find people to interview, and I was struck by Power Nap because both the art and the writing had so much energy to them and felt very professional. I wondered if I could really imagine it as a movie. I wonder if Hollywood has come calling yet.
Not really.
No. I can just imagine a lot of CGI and there's the Power Nap movie.
Well, I don't know. Maybe once it's finished. I mean, we're pretty close to the ending. I'm actually really curious to see how it ends. Maritza already kind of told me the way it goes, and I think it might. I do agree. It may become a really great movie. I would love to see it. But
sure.
So far, no. We're just pushing the comic book thing.
Has it been on paper in any form, or is it just on the web?
No, actually, we do have 2 books by now.
Okay.
They were financed in
Kickstarter.
Indiegogo.
Kickstart. Okay. So only the Kickstarter supporters have them.
Well, there's a store online, so if you want them, you can. They're for sale.
Oh, you are selling them? Okay, I didn't see that on the site, but
we need a bigger button.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, well that's cool.
Yeah, they're there.
It's possible.
The whole length. We did have planned the whole length of the thing. It's designed to be 9 episodes long. And, we originally thought about it as if it was either. We didn't know when we were starting out how we would print it. If it would have gone in an American format with 22, 24 pages each, or an European format with 60 something or 70. So we started doing, let's do it American style with 22, 24 each episode. And let's make it in a way that if we want to do it European, we just put 3 episodes in a book. And that's precisely what we ended up doing. The book is large size, it's European sized. And we have, the first book is episodes 1 to 3. And the second book is 4, 5, and 6. Right now, online, we've finished episode 7, and we're somewhere in the first pages of episode 8. So we're just 1 episode left to be done.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And only Maritza knows where it goes. He just tells me once I finish the drawings.
So what keeps you inspired to keep creating?
Maritza, you might answer that because I need to think about that one.
Well, basically, I believe that you basically cannot stop.
It just keeps coming, huh?
Yes, it keeps coming. I mean, comics have been really satisfying outlet for me. I mean, I really have a lot of fun making them. So if it stopped being fun, well, I would stop making them. But it has not, so I keep making them. It sounds kind of dumb or maybe too simple, but I believe that if you don't enjoy making, if you don't enjoy the process, then there is nothing for you to do in comics, because you are not going to become rich by doing comics, and
it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. You're not going to become rich or famous. So basically, you're doing it out of love because you really love doing it. You really love the process, and the rest is just fluff. It's just extra.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Bachan, did you think of an answer?
Well, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to do comic books, and to me, it just gotten to be such a regular thing. It's a part of me, so I can't really imagine myself doing anything but comics. It's a daily thing. What I do in advertising, to me, it's also comics. It's storyboarding. Just comics I don't really enjoy all that much because I have a lot of bosses telling me that I should draw differently or that a sauce doesn't look particularly delicious or something like that. But the whole idea, to me, the whole power of generating a world, making an image, and having readers go in there and stop thinking of them as drawings and think of them as characters, and seeing a floor and seeing a ground. To me, it's like being God in a way. It's addictive. That feeling. I love when I see the finished pages, and particularly when the acting becomes so immersive in a way. To me, the greatest stories are the ones that after years you might say, "Oh, I cannot remember where I read it, but there was this guy that did this and this and this, and I don't know if it was a movie or a comic, or if it actually happened." When you can use the language, because to me, comic book art is a language. If you can use it to that level, to me, that's a big win, and I love being able to do that. I wanted to do that ever since I was a kid, since I was 6 years old, and I read comics back then. Unlike Maritza, I did read long-form comics. I started out with Asterix, the French.
Yes.
And then moved on to other. Well, I did read Peanuts. I read Mafalda, which is a very famous comic book, comic strip from Argentina. And finally, when I was about a teenager, I got blown away by Mad Magazine, the old Mad Magazine by Harvey Kurtzman.
The comic book version.
Yeah, the old. My dad was a big fan. He had a lot of books over there. I couldn't understand English back then, but to me they were worlds I could get lost into. That's the first time I do remember feeling this thing I just explained. This feeling that there's a bigger world that I might not be seeing because I'm just watching one panel at a time. But you feel that if you go left or right in that panel, there's a bigger world where that character is in. That's why I think I fell in love with comics as a language.
I see. Yeah, that's cool. How do you think the comics industry will change in the next 5 years?
Oh. Jesus, I don't know.
Any ideas? Predicting the future here. Maritza does that all the time. So, Maritza, any thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, I do have some thoughts on that. Basically, I believe that the comic book format, the magazine format, is on the way out. It's going to become harder to sustain with the years, and graphic novel is taking over.
I tend to agree. Also, from the production standpoint, I think that the assembly line system that currently is handled in Marvel or DC is probably going to go out of fashion because it's just going to be unsustainable. So
yeah,
probably,
and the audience is aging.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
They're
amazing.
to open it a bit by being more inclusive. Maybe just trying to expand the market to women and girls. They are trying, but their efforts are kind of a bit clumsy. I believe that they are good, but ultimately it's the format that is doomed.
Mm-hmm.
The format is doomed because the periodicals are doomed.
Mm-hmm.
The distribution of paper week after week or month after month is too expensive, and it's going to completely become substituted by online and digital downloads.
Mm-hmm.
And physical copies are going to be replaced by graphic novels. I mean, comics in book format that will be available in bookstores. And comic book stores are basically and sadly on the way out.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's going on in the States right now? It seems like the publishers are sort of trying to work against the flow of history to prop up the comic book shops, but I think that that's not sustainable forever. And they're already sort of fighting with themselves because they're putting out issues and then putting them together into trade paperbacks, and then some people wait for the trade and don't buy the issues, and so that then it's sort of they're in conflict with themselves, kind of.
Yeah, well, and the distributors, Diamond, and all those, the system where they are working with is really bad. I mean, if you want a title, if you don't want the title to be canceled, you basically have to pre-order. It's just too much hassle.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then you pre-order them, but if the word does not get out, then the title is canceled.
Mm-hmm.
So that does not work anymore. It's just too much. It's too inconvenient, and the world is moving towards convenience.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I think that maybe some titles, the most popular ones, the Spider-Man, I don't know, they will survive, and comic book shops, comic book stores will become hobby shops. I mean, they will have movie-related merchandise based on the comic.
But as you said, it's mostly a movie-related. One thing I'm noticing now is that even though it seems like comic books are everywhere because of the Marvel movies and DC movies, and nowadays everybody knows who Wolverine is.
Yeah.
I started drawing comics, nobody knew. What I see, normal people, let's just call them civilians, people who don't read comics. Yeah, they think that comics is a genre, not a language.
Yeah.
So if you ask in a crowd in a school, who knows who Captain America is, everybody will know. But then you ask, who has actually read a Captain America comic book? Probably one or two.
Yeah. They've just seen the movies.
So I think comic books, as Maritza said, are going to move away from the format right now. As a language, I think it's going to be alive and well. And I think it's probably going to have to move into a more author-based kind of work. Not, as I said, not a assembly line. Because this time, I don't think you can actually keep on affording having a writer, 2 editors, 3 letterers, a penciler, 2 inkers, and 6 colorists. I think it should be more a smaller group. We kind of hope that we're a good model for that. Let's see how we do. If 10 years from now we're still doing comic books, then we were right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, but that was basically, I agree. And I only wanted to point out that comics will become movie-related merchandise. That's what I'm saying. That they won't be a thing anymore. Just they will be in the shelf with the rest of the movie-related merchandise, with the toys and with the action figures. That's what I think is going to happen. That it's going to die along with all the rest of the newspapers and the magazines.
Yeah.
You're talking about the format. Just to be specific, not about the language.
No, not the language. I was talking about the monthly issue, the magazine. format.
Yeah, I think it won't be going to the comic shop on Wednesday every week anymore. It'll just be maybe they would put out issues just digitally and then collect them into a printed trade paperback. So
Yeah, I
the
think
comic shop could still sell the trades, but they wouldn't be selling issues every week probably.
And if that's the case, probably they're not going to last long because they're going to have to compete with Walden Books or these big
That's true.
bookstores that they already sell a lot of graphic novels.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, as Maritza says, probably it would become movie-related merchandise, hobby shop, whatever, other kinds of things besides comics.
Yeah, I think so.
Sure, or maybe into games or something like that. So in terms of content of comics, regardless of if it's printed or web or whatever, what kind of stories do you think could be done that haven't been done yet, or storytelling techniques, maybe?
I don't know. At least in the storytelling technique, I might be a very traditional. I like the full panel, the full page thing, and moving left to right, up and down. I know there's a lot of experiments. I tried a few, but I never got really involved with them. So I don't know. Maybe that's something to be embedded by somebody younger than me. I don't know what Maritza has to say about that.
Well, I can tell you that in the web, there, after all the college strips happened, there were a lot of experimentation like that. There are lots of experimentation, and I mean infinite canvas, for example, the infinite canvas concept that never convinced me at all, by the way. But ironically, UCRFH uses some sort of infinite canvas. But for example, hyperlinks, animation included at some bits, at some points. It's been done. If you can think it's been done in the web.
Yeah.
If you go to convention, we went to a convention called SPX last year.
Bethesda, Maryland.
Yeah.
It was amazing, and we saw a lot of indie authors there. So they are obviously making the experiments to the younger people, but I believe that there's still a lot of room for taking the craft more, not the craft, taking the language more seriously, telling bigger stories, more important stories beyond a dick joke, for example. And it is already happening. I believe that it is already happening. That comics have won Pulitzer Awards, for example. But I believe that there's going to be a lot of Hollywood looking at comic books like as a base for more serious stories, not only escapism, not only superheroes, not only adventures, but more perhaps more adult content.
Are you thinking about an example on that?
I am thinking about the ending the stigma of comics being for children, for once and for all.
Or just superheroes, I guess.
As an extension of that. Extension of that, it's basically the same. You and I, we are all aware that this is not true anymore. That comic books are actually not for children. But to the civilians, they think that they are for children. And this is actually emphasized by the movies because they are made mostly to encompass a general audience. The DC has been kind of trying not to do that with spectacular failure.
So, debatable results. Yeah.
Yes, that's being too kind. But I believe that, well, you are going to see something like, I don't know, there had been examples already, like movies based on graphic novels that are not superhero based.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they are becoming mainstream. That's my point. The comics as a language, they are going to become mainstream sooner or later. That's my point.
Okay, let's hope we're there.
Yeah, it's starting to happen. Sure. Okay. So what's coming next from you guys?
Oh, okay. For us as a team or individually?
Well,
There's
both.
a lot of stuff.
Both.
Well, in my case, actually, besides advertising in the comics world, well, I'm relaunching my oldest character, Bulbo. I have a new site that, with the help of Maritza, it's there. It's Bachan.me. It's in Spanish, though.
Okay.
But that's El Bulbo. So the strips over there would be the 5th book of that character. I've done a lot of them. That's like my longest running character. That's a character I made up when I was a teenager at school, and I was too nervous to talk to girls, so I left them drawings of this guy character. By the way, it didn't work. Anyway, so that's one thing, and the other, I'm working right now for Boom Comics.
Oh.
That was a nice side effect from working on PowerNap. An editor at Boom Comics saw PowerNap, liked it, and he offered me a job, and I've done already 3 projects, and I'm on the 4th with them. I did a miniseries called Imagine Agents, and then another Rocket Salvage, and the latest one I did was an adaptation of Bill and Ted. You remember that movie? In the
Bill and
I
Ted,
think late
yeah, okay.
early 90s, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just finished a comic book with them called Bill and Ted Go to Hell. I just drew that. Somebody else wrote it. Somebody else colored it. It's just my drawing and inks, but it was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
They actually let me get away with it. And now I'm actually doing a backup pages for a comic and Power Rangers. I was never a big fan, but it's still fun to draw Power Rangers. It fulfills my craving for drawing monsters.
Mm.
Have you guys seen the trailer? It looks pretty good.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know where the comic book I'm working on. It's kind of more based into the original TV series, so it's a bit more silly.
I insist it's a tie-in product.
Yeah, I guess. Well, that's for now. I still have a lot of other stuff, but this is the one that's for sure. The rest is just I keep trying to move my full-time job from advertising into comics with debatable success.
What about France?
Yeah, I'm doing a comic book for a French publisher, Humanoids. I'm drawing Nirto Mirli. I already had 2 books. I'm working on the 3rd really slowly. I'd like to be a lot faster than that, but it's suffering the same destiny as PowerNap. Being left on the side because of advertising work.
I see.
But at some point, I hope I'll be back there.
Okay. Maritza, what are you doing?
Well, I'm basically I'm retaking CRFH because I stopped doing it for some time. So I'm going to do that, and I'm still, PowerNap, and another book that I'm preparing that it will be a surprise. So I cannot tell you about too much about it, but it's in the works. Obviously, it's kind of. I was trying to launch it before starting CRFH again, but considering that I think that my readers deserve a bit of this distraction with all the crap that is happening right now. So I'm going to try to do that before being distracted with something else, and possibly when PowerNap is ended, because obviously my duties as a writer are much lighter than Bachan's. I can simply finish writing it, and then I can take the other project, so I don't get too messed up in the head with so much things happening at the same time.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how PowerNap ends.
Okay, so are we.
PowerNap is at powernapcomic.com. I'll link to that and Maritza and Bachan's other comics from the show notes at deconstructingcomics.com. You can write us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com or look up Deconstructing Comics on Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, and YouTube. All our social media links can be found on the right sidebar at deconstructingcomics.com. Also, please give us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. And you can help Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics, and To the Bat Polls move up to bigger and better things by becoming a patron at patreon.com/deconcomics, or send a donation via PayPal to donate@deconstructingcomics.com. Our theme is from bensound.com. Last Thursday on To the Bat Polls, Paul and I talked about a Catwoman arc featuring Leslie Gore, That Darn Catwoman, and Scat Darn Catwoman. Look up To the Bat Polls wherever you find your podcasts or at tothebatpolls.libsyn.com. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and Wilele and I will critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com, and please try to keep it to about 30 pages. A new episode is coming this Thursday right here in this podcast feed. Then next Monday, I talk with Craig Rippon, who is currently interviewing African-American comics creators for a film called Black Ink. We'll talk about the making of the film, the state of African Americans as creators and as comics characters, and more. So be here next week. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.